everybody to today's webinar from the Open Group, which today I'm very pleased to say is being led by Orbis Software, a member organisation of the Open Group. I'll hand over to our speaker, Peter. I would just like to go over a few housekeeping issues to keep the event moving forward smoothly. We encourage you to ask questions during this event. This is obviously one of the major objectives of bringing these webinars to you. The best way to submit a question is either via the text chat facility or better via the text Q facility. If you do submit a question, can I ask you to address your questions to all participants? That way everyone gets to see all the questions that are being submitted. Peter will endeavour to answer all questions at the end of the presentation. You'll also be interested to know that this whole event is being recorded, so that's both audio and visual. So if you have to leave the event early for any reason, or if you experience any local technical difficulties, then a recording of this event will be available tomorrow, and you'll receive an email with the appropriate URL where you can access that recording. So Peter, if ready, can I ask you to start your presentation?
Absolutely. First of all, thank you, Simon, for having us back to present to the community. Today we'll be covering a very important topic in enterprise architecture, something we get asked as a tool on a regular basis. Is to say, how show some immediate progress? With managed out breathing down my neck, how can I show that I'm accomplishing something? How can I actually show that this isn't got the potential to be some sink of resources? It makes it a much harder sell for management, and they can give them that confidence factor that you will deliver results, and deliver results in an approval time frame. So we'll be presenting the selection of approaches we've seen work in various customers, all giving management a comfort factor that the activities are actually bearing fruit, things being accomplished, and it's not a pure academic activity, which, as most, or if not all of us are aware, is an accusation that is very often levelled at the enterprise architecture discipline. So, how is the topic? I'm going to address what is, to a large extent, the elephant in the room, which is show quick wins in enterprise architecture. Enterprise architecture is about transforming the enterprise. Enterprise that's going to have a sizable effort is not the kind of organisation that turns on a sixpence or turns on a dime. I'm going to talk briefly about if possible to even have quick wins in an enterprise architecture environment. Then I'll consider some wins which are applicable to pretty much any organisation. May look familiar to a number of the community. Then I'll consider how some of the quick wins that you can deliver in enterprise architecture need to be tailored to the specific goals and concerns of the organisation. And then we'll open up the floor for some conclusions, some concluding points, and questions and answers. Let's start by addressing the obvious question: can you do quick wins in enterprise architecture? Or simply a obvious contradiction in terms? On the left side, the proponent who says that enterprise architecture, it's about transforming the enterprise, it's about streamlining your applications, your organization, aligning the technology with the enterprise organization, transfer each of the levels, the AT, applying the tough ADM to achieve that. But But implicit that is in such an effort like that is going to be difficult, time-consuming, involving a lot of shuttle diplomacy between various stakeholders. Opinion expressed in various discussions, various bulletin boards, discussion forums, and so on, that the very idea of quick wins in enterprise architecture is a non sequitur, just doesn't happen. What I've got to do in this presentation is that this is true, and I have complete sympathy and agreement to that position. First of all, what an enterprise architect would consider a quick win is not necessarily what their stakeholders will consider a quick win. And the desire to see quick wins on the part of management is often a desire to get reassurance that output, tangible progress is being made. So I'm going to consider about the various output from an EA effort that you can use to show that you are making progress, that you are accomplishing something. And why is that important? Well, the simple fact in pretty much any organization that does enterprise architecture, and it's whether it's some multinational corporation, whether it's a United States federal agency, whether non-profit, railways agency in Britain, or whether it's a Grant Thornton in the US, the simple fact of the matter is managers circulate, budgets are tied to annual cycles and quite often quarterly cycles. So you come in with look, it'd be a long, hard slog, and we're going to see any outputs, any progress for 18 months. And you'll get a response that we've seen in customers where the architecture department has delivered a message. Buy-in into the whole idea of enterprise architecture just vanished. It'd be like that. Part of enterprise architecture is stable management. I suspect a lot of the people on this webinar will be familiar with IEEE 1471 diagram, where you look at what are your stakeholders, what are their concerns. You make some views. A very prevalent concept, been adopted very well by TOGAF. And getting funding, getting approval to expend resources on an enterprise architecture effort, stakeholder for that purpose are the people who hold the budget. And the people who influence the CIO, their reports, the program directors, heads of security, help desk. The structure differs, but it remains. The guys who authorize and influence the budget need convinced that it is not a pure theoretical activity. Seen as being a group of people in a huddle, without anything, not communicating anything, month in, out, that is not going to happen. You are not going to get the buy-in, and we've seen various organizations struggle with that. And like dashboards, they like online views, things that help them understand what's in the environment. So I'm going to go through how a very important part of doing any EA effort is your incremental work products, showing things you've managed to accomplish as intermediate products. They themselves were seen as wins, accomplishments, progress that has been made. So let's talk through the generic quick wins that are possible. The simple fact of the matter is, IT struggle, various concerns, budgets, various programs. So it's a very important stakeholder community. They're going to like things that help them do their job, things that help them handle on what their activities are, what's going on in the IT estate, and inspire them as to focusing priorities. And generic ways that you can do that. It's possible that there are some people in the EA community who are not familiar with core diagrams. The groundbreaking book, Enterprise Architecture as Strategy, Creation for Business Execution, that I reference at the bottom of this slide, recommended book. One of the key ideas within it is that you use a core diagram showing a heads-up single picture of what exists within the organization. Depending on how the organization works, it may focus on business functions, data, processes, and the shows a kind of sample life diagrams that have been produced. 4 types to the 4 types of organization that the authors identify. But it's important to realize, yes, this is an intermediate step from the purpose of the, or from the perspective of the A department, about just trying to understand what is it we do, what are our concerns, what's the 50,000 foot picture of our environment. That very diagram will be seen as immediate end product. Something different, something they can understand, something that new executives coming in can look at, just try and get started. Definition of a core diagram, without wanting to phrase the book too much, is a heads-up view of either the whole enterprise or a specific part of the enterprise, with the key that you don't need to be an architect to get it. Diagram, a very well-known concept in the EA community, is going to be a quick win from the perspective of management. A generic quick win, which I've seen as being popular in a variety of different customers, is your motivation model. What are the corporate concerns? What are our goals? What are our objectives? There's a variety of ways to represent that. The management group, they have a business motivation model. Quite deep and comprehensive set of object recommendations for implementation and so on. Moving to home, the group has Archimate. And in 2.0, there's the optional motivation extension, allowing you to map stakeholders, drivers, assessments, so on. And then, of course, the TOGAF specification. There are viewpoints such as the business footprint diagram. This version you use is, to a large extent, less important than the fact that you communicate what you have actually done. An EA, an enterprise architect, is likely to view this as an intermediate step. It's a way to start streamlining the organization, start streamlining the IT estate, aligning them from layer. The work product is itself a huge heads-up view for management. And a view that is often quite useful from the perspective not so much from generic management, but certainly from senior IT management, is developing your enterprise information model. What are core concepts? What are your data elements that you are processing? So, 3 examples of generic level views of what's going on in the organization. Now consider some specific examples, always applicable to a particular organization, depending on the concerns, depending on the drivers within the organization. It's not a massive list, but the examples that we have seen work. And the first, the capability map. Organization able to do. The fact of working out what capabilities of an organization or of a section of the organization, a segment perhaps, value in and of itself. For instance, heat map a traffic light system to show you our capabilities, how mature are they, how do they match to the level of capability that we want to have. A heads-up view for management. And there's different ways to show it. A simple hierarchy diagram like we're seeing here, a bubble chart diagram. Again, the precise formatting, the precise way you convey the information is less important than the fact you are actually doing it and you're showing you have performed the analysis, you have collected the information, now you're communicating it to business. Way of addressing a specific concern. We've encountered various organizations where it's been a particular thing on the mind of the CEO or direct reports. Time indications, specifications, performance, response times. Online view of how to our applications, how stable our applications, show an enterprise-wide or segment-wide map of the applications that are being used, and then it's management to understand. Okay, so maybe we have a particular application that it runs very slowly and it crashes all the time. So something to look into. From an perspective, the first step, you then start analysing the application. Decide, does it be re-architected, replaced? For the good things, the value that it delivers. For simply being able to get that grip, that grasp on what the state is in itself a step forward. Roadmaps, very popular is as a activity that we're seeing at the moment. The ability to trace through these applications when they go live, when they're retiring. What's replacing them? Are they merged into another application? It could be technologies. We have support for SQL Server 2005, and it has these dependencies on these applications. So these applications, in turn, will need to be considered for upgrading, replacement. Again, something that we would normally be doing merely as part of an EA activity, but being able to provide that heads-up view to management, that's delivered to them immediately. Now, considered a handful of ways that you can show intermediate progress to manage and show that you are actually accomplishing something with your link. But of course, depending on how much buy-in, depending on how disparate the organisation is. Something like a capability map. Maybe it will only take you a few weeks. Maybe it will take you several months. And if it matters, then even, by providing these intermediate views, you run the risk of being seen as going off into a huddle and not anything. So it's important to actually show where you've got to. Shafts, share them with the stakeholders. And think how you can engage your stakeholders. Putting a point is a valid option. Buying it is a valid option. What is a strategy exists for how you're going to share your products, how you're going to share your drafts with stakeholders, elicit their feedback and their input. So engaging in this activity, trying to show quick wins, showing your incremental work products, showing that progress is being made. To remember, communicate with the stakeholders. Don't feel you have to wait until you've got finished products. It means you're going to have to go silent on them for several months. We've seen a couple of customers fall into that trap, and now we are careful to warn customers against that. Communication is, how do you make the information available? You share the information, how do you solicit feedback from your stakeholders? Ultimately, is a leadership position within the department, and all leaders have to be selling their ideas. Strategies are no different. So, some points. You could, if you go onto the web, go to places like the LinkedIn discussion forums, other discussion forums. There are proponents saying that the simple idea of quick wins just does not exist in enterprise architecture. It's about transformation. So I've argued during this presentation that while that is true in and of itself, what a manager sees as a win is not necessarily what a manager sees as a win. So by finding your intermediate outputs, socializing them, engage stakeholders, start building support from management, they can start seeing the value of what the enterprise architecture department are doing, merely by sharing the outputs that the department are creating. And critical to achieve that is considering how best you can communicate that information, how to engage the stakeholders, of these deliverables. This presentation has stimulated some thoughts amongst some of you. In this webinar, some of the advice that we give to our customers on how to get managers supporting EA, how to combat that perception of EA as our academic exercise goes for 18 months and then doesn't deliver anything. I'm to finish the presentation and open the discussion to questions.
That's great, and many thanks for that. We have a question too on the chat facility, so if anyone has any questions now, please do feel free to write them either in the chat text facility or in the text QA facility, and as usual, if you could address them to all, then everyone gets to see them. So thank you very much, and do submit those questions now. Yes, Peter, we do have a question. There's a question here from Hashanda S. Asking how much emphasis should be given to using tooling. So without organisations and EA maturity, it is very hard to convince businesses to fund this investment Do you have any suggestions around that question, Peter?
Sure. The old phrase, a fool with a tool is still a fool. So it is possible to get too obsessed about which tool you use. What's important to understand in the selecting a tool is what are you hoping to achieve with it. Depending on maturity, perhaps higher analysis, data feeds and so on, not actually what you want. What's more important is the ability to easily create views and easily share heads of views with managers. And it's a simple fact, a picture paints 1,000 words. The tool is visual, so consider what are the visual presentation capabilities of the tool that you adopt. As I say, the simple immediate option is SharePoint, directly to a SharePoint site. ID, you want something that provides a bit more of a portal, a bit more of a way to search and navigate information online. And there's a number of good tools out there. Many of them, including ourselves, are members of the Open Group and can be found on the Open Group website. So what I'll really do there is just consider points I've talked about here. You consider how you're going to communicate what you've done to stakeholders. What are the capabilities there? Because without buy-in and support, the tool you've chosen becomes somewhat moot.
Peter, thank you for that. Got a question here from Bradley Safer, which I think is a very interesting question. And he says, I'm concerned that immediate results may be taken out of context, prevent individual stakeholders from running off and make changes based on a particular view of information without taking the whole into account. Think about that, Peter.
That's quite a good point. It's interesting point. It's the classic problem that we IT face, isn't it? You show a draft, you show an intermediate, whether it's a mock-up of a screen or a draft of a diagram, and people take it as, okay, so we're done then. We can work on this. So it's for differentiating whether it's finished product or draft, it's a case of hedging it around with the necessary caveats. Up to and definitely including having a big watermark of draft diagonally across the diagram. In terms of it being a finished product and stopping people going off and making changes, that's really a question for governance. Talked about EA models and sharing EA models, but another aspect of EA, and something that TOGAF is quite good actually in terms of provide guidance on, set up your governance model to start lining it so that people aren't making changes. Really, absolutely, it is important to be there. Just sharing information by itself, you need to caveat it, and it doesn't implement a governance model by itself, sharing the information.
Peter, I've got a couple of questions here asking about communication. I'll read one here from Kuldeep Devesh, asking what improves the communication between EA and the engineering level folks that actually implement this activity. He says, sometimes EA strategizes and creates approaches and long-term roadmaps. They can be purely communicated and sometimes not at all. When it comes to implementation, there is a big disconnect and resistance to implement it. What are your thoughts about communicating these activities, Peter?
Yeah, in all of the communication, again, I reference what I said about viewpoints. I talked about high viewpoints, 50,000-foot views, which are managers because they hold a budget. Well, yeah, when it comes to implement, almost more important stakeholder group are the people who are going to have to accept changes, change their projects. And again, it's a sales activity. It's showing different benefits. The community, it's the 1471 approach again. Need to implement architecture on applications, streamline the applications, standardize them. You need to go to the evangelizing stage with the measures. Why is this going to be better? It will reduce the costs of support, for example, specialized staff, if you're streamlining on one platform. Or if you improve stability of interfaces, less downtime, less customers on the phone. Different use cases. It's probably not practical to talk through all of them on this call. So I always go back to the fact that ultimately it is as much of a sales activity as a technical activity. You need to identify the stakeholders and what do they care about. And TOGAF so explains, different stakeholders will have different concerns, and you select the right points to address their concerns.
Thank you. We've got an interesting comment here from Alan Salzman. I think it's a supporting comment that you may want to respond to. Pete, he says, link EA to asset management is always a win in my experience. Resource management, both personnel and physical intellectual property is a real ROI for EA. What do you think of that, Peter?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's quite interesting being based over here in Washington, D.C., talking to various governmental and federal agencies. It's very much the mentality over here, and this is to extent where some of it came from, the DoD and so on. Have to link EA in with their CPIC, Capital Planning, Investment and Control. So, linking EA to what assets should we be retiring, what assets can we streamline, to reduce our costs, and if there is a way to quickly do that, then it is the ultimate quick win, because, let's face it, it's all money. In terms of how to trace it through, the one bit of work that's quite interesting in that area is the Enterprise Architecture Benefits Framework. If you Google EAF, it's what was done by a variety of academics, I think over in Europe, and they wanted to draw a unified framework of benefits, various publications that are out there. Really a finished product, I would say, but it's certainly a very first step.
All right, well, thank you very much for that. I'm just looking through, and it appears that we've come to the end of the questions on the tech facilities. I think this is probably a good opportunity just to bring this presentation to...
And a question from Hunter there, because I've kind of something that I talked about in the slide deck, the Enterprise Architecture Benefit Framework. Just Google it, EABF Enterprise Architecture, and you should find it coming up in the link.
Great, you picked that up. Thank you very much for that. So I think this is a good time to bring this to an end. I think, thank you once again, Peter, for your time. It's a very insightful presentation as usual. Please, everyone, do keep an eye on the Open Group's webinar schedule page. We do have an ongoing schedule of events coming up over the next few months. So I'd like to thank you all for attending the presentation. I hope you'll join us again in the future. Peter, just one final comment from you.
The one I would make is, if you've hopefully seen Glengarry Glen Ross, the ultimate film about selling. As I say, architecture is as much of a sales and evangelical activity, and Alec Baldwin's famous speech, always be closing. You have to always be communicating the benefits. High-level diagrams that we've talked about are a way to start doing that closing with managers. But take this as a kernel that with your stakeholders, application architects, network architects, whoever you have to get on board, always being in mind, why do they care? What are the benefits to them? Closing.
Peter, that's a really good ending comment. So on that note, I'll end the presentation. Many, many thanks, everyone.
Thank you.